we said from the very beginning, we said, let's make a film where we don't talk about David's films, because we knew that if we kind of framed it in his early periods, that by diving into his early life, we would find clues to understanding his films better.
I think every time you do something like a painting or whatever, you go with ideas, and sometimes the past can conjure those ideas and color them, even if they're new ideas. The past colors them.
Everything. Mm-hmm. And we knew that that we were going to be getting stories that people could maybe relate to his films. We started asking Lynch some questions at his house, and he was sitting there with his arms crossed, smoking a cigarette. And we had asked him questions. I don't remember the question, but you could tell by his body language and the way he answered that he wasn't really engaging. And then finally he said to us, he said, "Pick up the camera, follow me. You'll know what the film is about when it's over." And we ended up collecting about 25 hours worth of stories from David, with the promise that one day we're going to turn over all this material to Lula. Yeah, Rick Barnes, the other director, he was living there. So in the morning he would wake up, David would come down with his coffee into the studio and start either continuing a painting or starting a new painting. And it would continue the whole day. He would take a break for coffees and cigarettes. Sometimes he would stop to take time to write. I don't know what he's working on at that period, but you see him writing on the yellow piece of paper. And we kind of zoomed in once, and I saw the word Cooper, and I said, "Oh, he's working on Twin Peaks." And don't forget, we were there for 2.5 years, and in all that time, just in the studio, painting. It was incredible. But he lives the art life. That's what he does.
Many areas set up for like drawing and for painting and for different kind of experiments. And it was just what you would call, the art life, right before your eyes.
In the film, David talks about how he used to read that book by Henri called The Art Spirit. And he said, he would always carry the book around because he loved the book. And he said that the art spirit eventually got interpreted into the art life. And it was a title that David came up with for the film. The one rule, which I always said to all the creatives on the film, the editor, the sound people, I said, let's keep our ego out of the film, because if we bring in our style, won't make sense with David's style. I was like, don't copy David, but don't force your sounds or your style into the film, and let's keep it more pure Lynch, but not copy David. So we ended up using his pictures, his art, his voice, his images, his story, even his music is in the film. So we tried to keep it let David do the talking through his visuals and his sounds as much as we can. We could have interviewed anybody that worked around David, but I kind of wanted to keep it pure Lynch, just have him tell his story. Yeah, I would say that even though we filmed for 2.5 years, really it was in development for 12 years. Our relationship had to grow, and we had to earn David's trust. And we got to a point where he was very comfortable talking about his life. I will never see his films the same way, because I know so many stories from hearing him tell them that I've come to kind of think that in a way a lot of it's very personal. But I also understand, I've gotten to learn his sense of humor. He has a very absurd sense of humor, and I see it, when he talks and tells these stories, the way he reimagined ideas from his past. I can see how the humor comes out in his films. David grew up in these small towns out in the West, covered by trees. I think 2 weeks before David showed up in Philadelphia, there was a race riot. And I think, 244 businesses were burnt down to the ground. So the city was really economically oppressed, and there was a race riot 2 weeks before David shows up in Philadelphia, and here he is. I hate to, but a white kid from the suburbs at the countryside coming into an urban city, and I think he just felt that mood that the city had, and the fear, that he always talks about in Philadelphia, and he loved it. It wasn't like he was afraid of it, but at the same time he was just he loved that feeling, and it just came into him, and it comes out in his films, and I see it all the time. Yeah, he sometimes, he told the story once, I don't think it's in the film, but he said, like, walking out in the woods, you see a piece of old wood laying on the ground. It's beautiful with grass growing. You flip it upside down, and it's decaying, and bugs and everything's crawling underneath. So there's always something underneath that beauty. Well, the David's story that he tells, that's the first thing we did before we had any visuals on it. We just had the voice telling us the whole arc, from being born to Philadelphia, that whole discovering his art life, becoming an artist. We had the story first with the narration, and see if any of these artworks speaks to us, kind of connects to some of these stories. And we saw it, and we're like, okay, this image reminds me of this story. So I had everything printed out in little cards, and we started just pinning it up on the board.
Like I said, maybe, my world was no bigger than a couple of blocks. And that's why I say huge worlds are in, those 2 blocks. Huge. Everything's there. Everything.
100% it would be Eraserhead, because his story basically leads up to him working on Eraserhead. And for the audience to see this film and then see Eraserhead, they would kind of continue the documentary in a way. Yeah, I love it. You escape everything. You kind of, no distractions, and you just fall into a film. The sound is larger, the image is larger, because it's so much larger, it can pull you in.